Hello, this is Legal Issue in Education by Sarah C. Anderson, the University of Texas at Arlington, the Office of Graduate Studies, College of Education, Educational Leadership and Policy Studies for 5381 Political and Legal Aspects in Education. First, the reasons I chose this topic. Well, I'm interested in education and the law, and I'm curious as to how this particular bill, Senate Bill 3, would affect my career and my district if passed by the Texas 85th Legislature. And I want to know more about the separation of church and state and the establishment and free exercise clauses within the First Amendment. And this particular bill, Senate Bill 3, I think addresses all of that. The value of this assignment, putting together this PowerPoint, I felt that it facilitated a way for me to learn more about my interest in education and the law, and I learned a great deal about how different laws, freedom of speech, separation of church and state, compulsory attendance, corporal punishment, are all applied in education, which ultimately affect my job, and that's what this course was about. And I always place value in learning something new that I can utilize in any context. And this is a new project for me. I've created plenty of PowerPoints, but I've never created a PowerPoint and done a recording presentation that could be used for professional development. And so this was also a new assignment for me, and I found value in that. Okay, let's get down to it. Okay, Senate Bill 3. It's the 85th Texas Legislature, introduced January 30th of this year and filed March 20th, 2017. It was authored by Senator Larry Taylor and co-sponsored by several others: Paul Betancourt, Donna Campbell, Bob Hall, Kelly Hancock, Donald Huffines, Charles Schwartner, and Nicholas Taylor. And it was placed in the Senate Education Committee with the following subjects: primary and secondary education, finance, primary and secondary education general, family, parent and child, insurance general, taxation general, scholarships, and comptroller of public accounts. Okay, the author's or sponsor's statement of intent. Well, Senate Bill 3 provides Texas students and their families with more educational opportunities through the creation of education savings account and a tax credit scholarship programs. And these programs will benefit both students who wish to exit the public school to pursue other school options and those students who remain in public school and are in need of financial assistance to pay for educational expenses. Now, both programs will ultimately be administered by the Office of the Comptroller of Public Accounts of the state of Texas, and they will contain numerous safeguards to protect against fraud, waste, and abuse. And as proposed, Senate Bill 3 amends the current law relating to the establishment of an education savings account program and tax credit scholarship and educational expense assistance programs. Now let's look at the education savings account and examine this a little further. The education savings accounts will provide funding for parents to personalize their students' education, and an ESA is usable for tuition at private schools, curriculum, tutoring services, and a variety of other educational opportunities. And families will also be able to roll their ESA funds over from year to year. Initially, I had the question of the word variety. To me, that's rather vague, and I want to know more about the requirements or the criteria that would be qualified for educational opportunities and what would be allowed for that money to be spent on. Okay, let's examine the tax credit scholarship program. The TCS program will help pay for the tuition costs of students who wish to attend private school and help cover the educational expenses of qualifying public school students. And the TCS program will be funded through credits on eligible entities, premium taxes, or through donations and grants. And it says that the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts will certify an educational assistance organization to distribute tax credit scholarships to Texas students. I'd also like to know more about this educational assistance organization, how that will be built, the requirements and the criteria and the guidelines for that particular organization and how it will be established. I had questions about that as well. Okay, the Rulemaking Authority. That is expressly granted to the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. And that's stated in Section 1.01 and Section 2.01 of this bill. That is a significant amount of power for one individual. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this bill and analyze it and interpret what we see here. First off, the separation of church and state does not appear in the Constitution, but is a long-standing legal principle authored by Thomas Jefferson, and it addresses the balance between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. The Establishment Clause says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, and the Free Exercise Clause states that Congress will also not prohibit the free exercise thereof. Now, Senate Bill 3 prohibits the content or religious nature of a product or service from being considered in determining whether a payment is allowed to a provider. And this is what I discovered, or what I feel about Senate Bill 3 and how I interpreted this. Senate Bill 3 is blind to religion. It treats religious providers no different from non-religious providers. They were equal under the law. But favoring religious providers violates the Establishment Clause, and disfavoring religious providers violates the Free Exercise Clause. So here, the separation of church and state favors the separation of church and state favors the Establishment Clause over the Free Exercise Clause. It proposes to prevent establishment of religion by making the absence of religion the default public policy. Now, there's no constitutional authority for that position. Indeed, it devalues or ignores the Free Exercise Clause. And Senate Bill 3 here establishes a two-voucher type system or programs. The first part of the bill advocates the savings account, which would give parents public money to spend on private school tuition and education-related expenses. And the second section of the bill involves the tax credit scholarship. And that would allow businesses to count contributions to approved scholarship organizations as credit against their insurance premium tax. I see that as rather restrictive because it allows the most vulnerable students of state operational costs per student. And there's a lot of discussion that school choice measures like education savings accounts might divert public money to private schools with no accountability, and that's the question. Some feel this just makes the school funding issues that we now face even worse than what they are. So there are thoughts that say the bill could help ease excessive enrollment at failing schools by subsidizing parents who want to take their children to schools outside of the public school system. And this is also linked to our new school rating system of A through F for districts as well as campuses. And the more research that I've done on Senate Bill 3, I think this is a rather large concern for public schools because it does take away from a vast majority of our schools that would benefit, in order to benefit private and religious schools. And taxpayer money would follow students to private schools and homeschools, which impact funding for public schools. So this bill certainly diverts public school funding, and therein lies the question: is this, is there a violation of church and state with that taxpayer money to religious organizations? And so this was my conclusion. Senate Bill 3 clearly violates the strict separation of church and state and allows public funds to be paid to religious providers. However, it does not necessarily violate the Constitution. The Constitution is indifferent to religion. It is not prejudiced against religion. And the separation of church and state is more of an overreaching solution to the balancing problem of infringing or promoting religion. And this is a controversial question, but the Constitution says what it says. The issue here, not only is it about taxpayer money going towards religious affiliations, but where is the accountability with the money? What are the details of the eligibility requirements? Public schools have accountability with regards to finances, student achievement, productivity, and the language in this bill does not exactly specify how that money that's generated from taxpayers would be verified and spent on proven, viable educational entities. And there's minimal or no conclusive research that shows charter schools and private schools outperform public schools in all areas. So There are some negative pieces to this for the educator. We lose funding for students' education in the public school system. And even though they say we'll have more money for students, I don't really understand how that will happen unless it's simply because the school pays a portion and the government pays the other portion. Teacher salaries may see changes as the pay scale largely depends on the number of students that we have enrolled in the district, which of course then decides how much money we receive for the district. And the families would take advantage of the families that would take advantage of this opportunity most likely would be students that are at the top of the class and want to send their kids to what they may believe to be a better performing school, like a private school, secular or non-secular. High performing band students, exceptional athletes, things like that. And so our student demographics and populations would change drastically within the public school system. But there are some positives. We might have smaller class sizes. I'm at a school that, at least for this particular area, seems to be on the forefront of change. We're embracing change. We embrace technology. We have for years. And our population, because of that, I believe, would continue to increase, which then again might increase our funding. And increased funding always leads to more opportunities for students. So those are just my thoughts on Senate Bill 3. And my references, Larry Taylor, of course, the senator that wrote this bill. And I also found some information on Texas legislature online. Thank you for your time, and I hope this was helpful.